This week in post, unscripted and uncut, it is a live edit. Hi everybody, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to do a live edit today. If you've not seen one of these before, live is in air quotes. It's not a streaming event, but it's me taking a photo. I've not done any work on it at all and going start to finish, press record. We see what we emerge with on the other side. But I got to say, the photo I'm working on today, I have pretty good hopes for. The bones of it are really solid. It's one I took during the San Diego Coastlines workshop. I shared some stuff about that earlier this week. We're going to dive right in here. And this is the frame we're going to work on. And I like just about everything that's going on here. Would I have loved a little more color in the sky? Well, sure, but you can't have everything. So what do I want to do to this image? Just doing an initial assessment, and there's some cropping I need to do. I got another fellow photographer up here, but I'm going to take a crop and move that out of the frame. I also want to tighten up a little on the right-hand edge. I'm not liking how this rock is coming to a point. That's a little bit distracting. I don't want to take the eye out of the frame. I'm fine to cut the rock, but I want to cut it a little closer here, and we'll experiment with that. And from there, certainly want to punch up detail on the rocks, accentuate this flow of water. This is really the story of my photo. Really, it's what's kind of happening here in the center of the frame. I want to make sure we draw the eye there, and then just make this the colors a little bit nicer. Bring those up a little bit. This was a reasonably overcast day, so not a lot of contrast. Need to do some work there. So let's begin. I hit the R key and bring up the crop tool, and the very first thing is just tugging in from the edge until the silhouette of another photographer is out of range. And I'm going to try right around there for this rock, and then check the horizon line. I'll just do a by eye rotation on that, and that looks pretty good. Looks like I've kept that out there. All right, we'll say done on that. Great. Let's deal with some spot corrections. I can see there's a ship or a boat, something on the horizon. So Q key for that. I'll do one click, and that looks like I did a very nice job. While I'm here, I'm hitting function arrow to go over to the left-hand side. I'm going to press the A key on and off a bunch of times. It's going to toggle this visualize spots option. And really what I'm looking for is anything that might be construed as a spot. I got a surfer out here. Take care of that one. That looks all right. That looks good. And I'm using, again, the function and arrow keys on a Mac. On a PC, I think it's the arrow keys are page up and page down. And those, I'm not sure what they are, if they're birds out there in flight or sensor spots, but they could be seen as a spot. So I'm going to correct those. That looks pretty good. Toggle that visualize spots back on. Not seeing anything obvious in the foreground there. What's this? That just looks like clouds. Okay. One more. Check. That looks all right. That looks okay too. Now, there may be more spots that show up. Sometimes that happens as we add contrast, we tweak colors. We've got the basics of it taken care of here. All right, so moving on to, speaking of basics, basic panel. Let's get going on that. Close out my spot removal. And we'll start with Adobe Color. Let me just skim these really quick. Actually, I can skim them with this, this grid. You can kind of take a look at them before we begin. This is a newer feature of Adobe's update to Lightroom. I kind of like what Adobe Landscape is doing as a starting point. That's pretty good. Now let's start working sliders here. The cooler temperature tone I think is gonna work pretty well. I'm not going to go too far on the warmth. I'm nudging it a little to the right, really watching the sand. Make sure that sand takes on that orange type tone. That's what it has, as well as the rocks. But I don't want to go so far as to lose the aquas that are in the water. And let's see, tint-wise, let's remove the tint, and then we'll redo the tint. Waiting for Lightroom to catch up here a little bit. Okay, I think I'll just keep that as it was. All right, histogram looks pretty good. Maybe a little tiny bit underexposed. So pop that up somewhat and then adjust the whites. I'm going to press the Option key while I do that and push it until I see clipping. There it is. Pull back some. Give myself a little bit of room on that histogram. Same thing for the blacks. Do this. Got a good black point. and I'm okay with a couple of specks of black there. I will open shadows, so the textures in these foreground rocks are good. We'll tug highlights back. I'm watching the sky as I do that, and certainly want to add some contrast. Get some more depth in this scene, and that's nice. We're already getting these fingers of water going on. This is shaping up nicely already, where I may not have to do anything particularly special. Now it looks like I've got some type of something or other going on down here. I'm going to go back into the spot removal tool, Q key, and A on and off. Now that's not a spot, that's just something that's slightly dark, and I guess when you're zoomed out it kind of looks like a spot, and when I'm zoomed in it doesn't really. I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm going to go ahead and do a cloning of this one because there's texture here, and this is not an important detail, so I'm not worried about losing anything. So I'm going to hit Q key back open, choose this spot, let it pick something else, H key to turn that back on, switch it to a clone. Feather looks good. Let's see. And I just went into the grid mode. That was terrible. All right. Back into develop. What happens when you use your keyboard shortcuts too rapidly? All right, let's get that point back up there. Make sure it's a clone point. Good. And that looks very, very nice. Okay, so that's good. That looks better than it did before. I don't have that illusion of a spot. Okay, let's see now. Color. Got to do some color work here. I want these greens on this piece of rock here, this moss, to pop up more. And I'll see about getting some of these aquas going here. So first thing we can do is visit vibrance. We're still on the basic panel, still working with really just the fundamentals and even a bit of saturation, because there's not a lot of oranges and reds, and there's a bit of orange in the rock, but it's not a like a hot sunset type orange or sunrise type orange. So that's pretty nice. Let's check into clarity here. I don't want to go too hard on this. If I go too far, it's going to get crunchy. Yeah, those highlights, especially on that right-hand side, are really get a little bit hot. We may do some localized clarity work on some of the rocks. That's pretty cool. Let's sanity check here. Let's see where we've gotten so far. This is before and after. You know, world of difference already, and we've really not done a whole lot of work. I mean, yes, I'm paying attention to these sliders and working them individually, but you know, this is not 7 stacks of filters or things like that. Because when you've got a nice, really strong photo to begin with, sometimes you don't need much else. HSL. So let's take a look at a little bit of color here. So thinking about these greens are really yellows in disguise. So if I shift the hue of yellow toward green, okay, problem. Can't do that because watch what's happening to the sand. Okay, this is with the shift. This is without. I started by watching the moss. I'm going to do that one more time. Moss looks great. However, the sand is taking on this green cast. That we can't have. That's not going to be good. This is going to be a limitation of Lightroom. I don't have these controls for a localized adjustment using a radial filter or a brush. I can do saturation. I can't do color shifts, and that's a real bummer. I really wish that Lightroom would add that in because it would make workflow smoother and faster. So I'm already thinking about, for that finishing touch to get that moss to pop up, I'll need to go to another tool that I can do that localized adjustment. Let's see if there's anything else I want to do with just more targeted saturation or luminance. What are the tones up in the sky here? Most likely blues. Yeah, blues and bits of yellow. So I'm not going to lower those here with luminance. I'll do that with a gradient to just take the edge off of the highlights in the sky. So right around there, let's take exposure down. Not too much, just a bit. Let's see that before and after. Before and after. Just let that sky retreat ever so slightly. That's good. And as far as, let's think about protecting that rock there. That's the O key. Let's go ahead, square this off to the horizon. And then we'll just brush away what we don't need. Let's get the brush, erase, auto mask. The flow can be pretty heavy. And let's shrink that down and just get rid of this change on the rock. does not need to be perfect. And actually, there's kind of an advantage to having it not being perfect. We'll make sure we don't introduce a halo or some other strange artifact on that high contrast boundary. So that's good. We'll do a done on that one. Oh, I'm killing myself here. These misclicks are killing me. All right, back in business. Like I said, live and unscripted. Mistakes happen. So let's see. So what have we got left? I would still like to punch up the moss on this rock and potentially the details on these. I'm going to give this a try, and I'm going to try it first with my foreground rock and using a radial filter. And I'm wondering if with a little saturation boost and some localized clarity, is that going to be enough to satisfy me, or am I going to need to take it into on one where I know that I can achieve this result? So I'm going to try to do, almost consider it a shortcut. So I'm increasing saturation. Notice invert is on. I'll press the O key for a moment. We can see what we're targeting. Actually tighten up that range mask a little bit too, so we can back this off from outside of the rock. Something like that. I'll brush and clean up if I need to. That plus some clarity. And is that clarity is really just kind of making it darker. It's not bringing out the textures in that rock. Okay, opening up the exposure helps some. Let's quickly do a before and after on just the radial mask. That's before and that's after. Right, before and after. That's pretty good. I do want to clean up that mask though. O key, erase, auto mask is set. Feather does not need to be that high. And we'll brush around the outside of this rock. Kind of like that. Okay, and then just get the straggling pieces that are on the outside. All right, turn that off. One more time with the before and after check. Before and after. You know what? I'm not fully satisfied with this. I'm going to take this over into on one, hit it with dynamic contrast. So I'm going to reset this, close that out. I'm going to finish my rock work and this bit of texture, and might also downplay, burn this left edge so that it's the eye is going to go here. And I've got some of my nice vignetting tools and things that are available in on one. So I'm going to go edit in, and I'm going to go into Effects 2018, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, here we are in on one, and let's get right into it with dynamic contrast. Actually, let's take care of that green moss I wanted. I wanted a foliage pop. You can see that nice green there, and open up the mask and invert it. B for the brush tool, X to switch to paint in, and I can just paint that color right in on this rock, and then I get that nice bit of green. And I don't have the sand taking on a green cast or anything else outside of it. I see some other mosses. I see, and I'm not clicking right now, I'm just kind of pointing. I see some things out here, and I see a little bit there, but I don't want to draw your eyes there, especially off to the edge. So we're just going to limit it to this particular rock. All right, now we'll do that dynamic contrast. We'll add that in, and that's too strong for my taste for this scene, and I'm watching the rocks. So I'm watching the rocks as I adjust this, because the next step's going to be doing some masking work. So let's see, before and after on the rocks. That's a nice punch. Actually, it's now that I've lowered it down, it's a nice punch on these fingers of water too, and I kind of like that. Before and after here. Let's see about toning it down just some, and I'll experiment with the masks on that. So let's hit the luminosity mask, and then I want to invert that. That's going to target the shadowy areas. So now before and after. Let's nudge that up some now, so you can see those differences before and after. So I'm getting a little more in the fingers here. I'm not getting too much harshness in the midground. I'm going to reset the mask for a minute. You see what I'm talking about. Reset the mask. This is getting harsher. So I've got full strength. Let's go really full strength. Full strength of dynamic contrast. That's too much. I don't want that much detail in the water, especially in the midground. We'll lower that down, and that's looking better for the scene overall. Then we add the luminosity mask. Initially, it's hidden from the rocks because the mask is going to be applied strongest to shadow areas and weakest to highlight areas. We'll invert that, and so we're masking much more away from the highlights. And that's giving me some detail here, but still keeping it soft, and that's working really well. It's also keeping the sky very soft. Press the O key for a minute. You can see the mask. It's almost like this photo negative kind of thing. The whitish areas are getting more of the contrast, more of this detail pop, and the dark areas are getting less. And so what we can do from here is tailor the mask a little bit. Feather, let's bring that down, and the opacity, bring that down. This is for my brush. Make the brush a little bit big, and I can add a little bit of extra of these this contrast into these fingers here. Just a little extra touch like that. Maybe a little bit around here just to give it an accentuation. That's good. I'm going to grab a local adjustment and we'll do a burn. So I've got a few things that I've set up as defaults or little styles here so I can quickly choose them. And this is just a minor decrease on the exposure. I'm going to keep a reasonably low opacity and just kind of brush around this area here to take some of the brightness out of this particular rock so it's not drawing away from my story. And this will help even more when we add a vignette, which will be our last step here. Back to overall settings. We'll add the vignette, and let's start with strong because it will be too strong. But we'll take the feather, push that up a little bit, open the size up, and open the brightness up some. Let's see before and after. Before and after, maybe a little less strength overall. Before and after, maybe even a little bit less strength. That's nice. Okay, another finishing touch. I want to open up this rock a little bit. Add another local adjustment. This time I'll do a dodge right there. We'll brush this in let's hit this a little harder. And also let me turn on the perfect brush so I have that edge detection. Let's go around this rock here so we can add a little bit of brightness there. So those details aren't getting lost. Right, that was, it's a wet, dark rock. I mean, that's just what happens when the rocks get wet and there's not a whole lot of sun shining on it. You don't get glistening, gleaming spectral highlights off of them. You get a whole lot of darkness there. One more time around. And so each brush stroke is adding to the strength of that adjustment here. So before and after. And we can even nudge it up, maybe another tiny notch. These are subtle changes, but those little subtle things, these are the finishing touches. They really add to the scene. I think I'm going to call this one done. I'm going to hit done down in the lower right corner, so get me over back into Lightroom, and we'll take a look at the before and after of all of these steps. All right, back in Lightroom, I just noticed I forgot to take care of this little tiny bit of little seaweed there. I'll do one more clone on that. And just right across there. That looks great. All right, now we're all finished. So we can take a look at the initial photo. Here's the before. Here's the changes that we did in Lightroom and the finishing touches in On One. So putting all that together, this came out to be a really nice scene. And I guess the tip of the week is let the photo tell you what tools you need to go use. And I was trying to do a certain step in Lightroom where I was trying to get that contrast and that greenish pop on a single rock. And I couldn't do that with those tools. It tells me I need to go to another tool to get the photo to its final state, what I want. So yeah, that's the tip. And that's going to wrap up this live edit. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, please let me know somehow. Comments on the video below. Questions from my website are always great. Love to hear from other photographers and what's on their minds. And until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.